The marketplace was alive with noise, lights, and colors. Merchants shouted, trying to sell fruits, metals, and strange glowing stones. Children ran between stalls, their laughter mixing with the sound of haggling. Guards in dark uniforms walked lazily, watching but not caring. Everywhere there was life, energy, and endless movement, but in the middle of the crowd, no one noticed the fragile figure. An old alien woman, her skin pale and cracked, her robe torn and dirty. She walked slowly, leaning on a broken wooden stick that bent with each step. Her eyes looked tired, her shoulders bent low. She opened her mouth to speak, but her weak voice was drowned by the noise of the market. She tried to ask for help, her lips trembling, but no one stopped. People pushed past her, some laughing, others looking away. To them, she was nothing, just another forgotten shadow in the busy world. The old lady stumbled, her stick snapped, and she fell to her knees. Her hands scraped the hard ground, blood mixing with dust. The merchants nearby looked at her but did not move. One guard even chuckled, whispering to another. "Not worth the trouble," the alien children giggled. Pointing at her, she lifted her eyes to them. But there was no kindness there, only mockery. In the distance, a human teenager watched. He was carrying a basket of machine parts, his clothes rough and simple. His name was Arik, a boy of no special importance. He was not rich, not powerful, just a worker's son. But his eyes caught the sight of the old woman, and something inside him would not let him walk away. Arik hesitated. He heard the whispers around him. "She is worthless, leave her, she is cursed. She is mad." But he saw her hands shaking, her lips whispering words no one cared to hear. The boy dropped his basket and pushed through the crowd. "Wait," he said softly as he knelt beside her. The old alien woman looked up, her eyes dim. But within them was something strange. A faint glow, almost royal, almost powerful. Hidden beneath layers of weakness, Arik took her arm gently. "Let me help you," the crowd around laughed. "A foolish human boy," one merchant sneered. "Helping a beggar? Waste of time," said another. But Arik ignored them. He lifted the broken stick and tried to fix it with a strip of metal from his basket. It was not perfect, but it was enough for her to stand. The woman's lips curved into the smallest smile. She whispered in a strange dialect, words soft and heavy Arik did not understand. But he felt the warmth behind them. He gave her water from his flask and she drank slowly, like someone who had been thirsty for years. When she was steady again, she reached into her torn robe. Her hand shook as she pulled out a small coin. It was unlike any coin Arik had ever seen, round, shining faintly, carved with symbols that seemed to move if you stared too long. She pressed it into his hand. Arik tried to return it. "No, I don't want payment. I only wanted to help." But she closed his hand over the coin, her gaze piercing, almost demanding. The boy felt a strange shiver run through his body. The coin was warm, almost alive. The laughter of the crowd grew louder. Look at him, taking money from a mad beggar. But Arik ignored them. He helped her sit near a quiet wall. Away from the pushing crowd, the woman's breathing calmed, her hands resting gently on her lap. Her eyes, though weak, now seemed to study him with deep interest, like she was measuring him. Judging something within him, Arik felt uneasy, but also strangely connected. Who was she? Why was everyone avoiding her? As the sun began to sink and shadows stretched long across the market, Arik prepared to leave, but before he could stand, the old alien lady spoke again, her words low but clear this time. "You are different," she whispered. "No one stopped, no one cared, but you did." Her voice trembled, but her eyes glowed faintly with something ancient, something hidden. Arik frowned. "Who are you?" She did not answer, only gave a faint smile that sent chills down his spine. And in that moment, from the corner of his eye, Arik noticed something. Two dark figures standing far across the street. Their eyes locked on him and the old woman. They did not move, they only watched. A strange feeling of danger crawled over his skin. The marketplace was still noisy, but suddenly, Arik felt as if the world had gone quiet. He looked at the woman again for the first time. He wondered if helping her had just changed his life forever. Arik walked slowly beside the old alien lady, guiding her through the busy market streets. Her steps were weak and the repaired cane wobbled, but she held on tightly. The crowd still stared, some laughing, some whispering, but Arik ignored them. He felt a strange duty, a quiet pull inside his chest telling him not to leave her alone. They reached a quieter corner, near the back of the market where broken stalls leaned against cracked stone walls. Arik placed his basket of machine parts down and helped the woman sit. She looked around nervously, her hands trembling as if she feared being seen. Arik handed her a piece of bread from his pocket, food meant for his own supper. The old lady stared at it, her eyes filling with tears, before she took it carefully and ate slowly. Every bite looked like it carried more weight than a meal should. Arik noticed how thin she was, her ribs visible beneath her robe, her hands bony and frail. When she finished, she whispered something in her dialect. The boy could not understand, but her tone was soft and thankful. He smiled. "It's okay. You needed it more than me." The woman tilted her head, her tired eyes studying him almost with disbelief, as if no one had ever given her anything without wanting something in return. From her robe, she pulled out the strange coin again and pressed it into his palm. This time she insisted, nodding firmly. Arik shook his head. "I told you, I don't want payment." But her hand squeezed his fingers with surprising strength. Her lips moved, shaping words he could not understand. But he felt the meaning. She was not offering payment. She was giving him something important. The coin pulsed faintly with light like a heartbeat. Arik shivered and slipped it into his pocket, unsure why refusing her felt impossible. As the silence grew between them, voices from the crowd floated over. Mocking words reached his ears. "Look at the foolish human boy. Wasting time on trash," another voice sneered. "Maybe he thinks the beggar will bless him." Arik clenched his jaw but said nothing. The old lady heard them too, her eyes lowering with shame. But Arik quickly spoke. "Don't listen to them. They don't understand." His voice was steady, and for the first time in years, the alien woman felt warmth from another being. She leaned closer, whispering again, but this time slower. One word stood out among her strange speech. "Royal." Arik blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. Royal. She was dressed in rags, ignored by all, yet her eyes glowed faintly when she said the word. Before he could ask her more, she coughed, her body trembling with weakness. Arik hurried to give her more water from his flask. She drank, then closed her eyes, resting against the wall as though she had carried a heavy burden for too long. As she slept lightly, Arik studied her. Something about her did not feel like the others in the marketplace. Yes, she was frail and forgotten, but there was a hidden presence, a weight around her like a faded crown. He touched the coin in his pocket and felt a strange warmth spreading through his fingers. The symbols carved into it seemed to shift when he looked closely, almost as if they were alive, almost as if they were watching him, unknown to Arik. A pair of eyes followed them from the shadows. Two cloaked figures leaned against a distant wall, pretending to blend with the market crowd. Their gazes never left the old alien lady and the human boy. One of them muttered, "So she still lives." The other whispered, "And now a human protects her. This complicates things." They slipped back into the crowd, vanishing before Arik could notice. When the old lady woke again, the market had begun to quiet. Stalls were closing, merchants counting their coins. Arik helped her to her feet. "Where do you live?" he asked gently, but she only shook her head, pointing nowhere, her eyes filled with loss. She had no home, no family, no one. Arik felt a sharp pain in his chest at the thought of leaving her behind. He could not imagine going back to his workshop and pretending nothing had happened. "Come with me," he finally said, surprising even himself. The alien woman tilted her head, her cracked lips parting as if she did not believe his offer. But Arik nodded firmly. "You can rest in the workshop. I'll find food for you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time a faint light of hope flickered in them. She touched his arm with trembling fingers, whispering again, the word "kind" escaping her mouth clearly this time. Arik smiled nervously, unsure why her gratitude felt heavier than any praise he had ever heard. They walked together toward the edge of the market, the woman leaning on her cane and Arik supporting her. The setting sun painted the sky in red and gold, and the boy felt as if he had stepped onto a path that could not be undone. Behind them, unknown to both, the two cloaked watchers moved carefully, following their every step. The air was heavy with silence, but it was not peaceful. It was the silence of danger waiting in the dark. Arik did not know yet, but his small act of kindness had lit a fire that others would try to smother, a fire that could change everything. And as the old alien woman leaned against him, she smiled faintly to herself, for in the eyes of this human boy, she had seen something no one else had shown her: hope. The night settled over the colony like a heavy blanket. The noisy market had gone quiet, the bright stalls closed, and only the sound of distant engines echoed through the streets. Arik walked quickly through the narrow alleys, guiding the old alien woman toward his father's small workshop. She leaned heavily on her cane, her breath shallow, but her eyes kept moving as if she feared someone would leap out of the darkness. The workshop was nothing more than a wide shed filled with tools. Scrap metal and broken machines. It smelled of oil and smoke, but to Arik it had always felt like home. He helped her sit on a wooden stool, covering her with an old blanket. She clutched it with shaking hands, her eyes softening for the first time that day. Arik set down his basket of parts and poured water into a tin cup, handing it to her. She sipped slowly, her thin shoulders relaxing as the warmth of the workshop surrounded her. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the ticking of an old clock filled the silence, but then she began to whisper, her voice trembling like fragile glass. Arik leaned closer, trying to catch the words. Her language was strange, older than the common dialect, but fragments slipped through. He heard words like house, betrayal, and again that one word she had spoken earlier. Royal. Arik frowned. Royal? What do you mean? The old lady's gaze lifted to meet his, her eyes shining faintly in the lamplight. She touched the coin he had placed on the workbench, her thin finger tracing its glowing lines. She whispered a word, and for a moment the symbol shifted, forming a crown-shaped pattern. Arik's heart pounded. He could not explain why, but the sight filled him with both wonder and fear. She began to speak in broken words, fragments of her story spilling out. Once, long ago, she had lived in halls of silver and crystal. She spoke of palaces above the clouds, of servants and guards, of endless stars bowing before her family's rule. Her voice trembled as she said the word empress, and Arik's eyes widened. Could it be true? Could this weak, forgotten woman have once ruled over thousands of worlds? She told him of betrayal, of blood spilled by her own kin. Her family had turned against her, stripping her of power, casting her into exile. Hunters were sent to chase her, treasures stolen, her people scattered. Her voice cracked as she whispered names of enemies Arik could not understand. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks as she clutched the blanket tighter. In her grief, Arik felt something heavy, something ancient pressing against the air of the workshop. The boy sat frozen, his mind spinning. She could be mad, nothing more than a broken beggar weaving fantasies. Yet the coin on the workbench pulsed with faint light, alive with strange power, and in the back of his mind something stirred. When his hand brushed the coin earlier, he had felt warmth, but now as he stared at it, images flickered in his thoughts, visions not his own, crowns of fire, armies kneeling, a throne carved from stars. He blinked hard, shaking his head, but the visions faded slowly, leaving behind a racing heart. The woman's voice broke the silence again, softer this time. They still hunt me. Arik leaned forward. Who? Her eyes grew sharp, burning with sudden strength. Those who took everything. Her hand trembled as she gripped his sleeve. They will come, they always come. The boy swallowed, a chill running down his spine. He thought of the cloaked figures he had seen watching in the market. Had they already found her? The workshop door rattled as a cold wind swept through the cracks. Arik stood quickly, checking the bolts, his heart uneasy. He returned to her side. You're safe here. No one will hurt you. Her lips curved into a faint, broken smile. Safe. With you. Her words touched him more deeply than he expected. For the first time he realized how lonely she must have been, ignored by thousands, hunted by enemies, and yet, in this small workshop a human boy had given her shelter, but in his chest doubt grew. What had he stepped into? He was only a mechanic's son, a boy who fixed machines, not someone who could stand against hunters or traitors. And yet, as his eyes fell on the glowing coin again, he could not shake the feeling that fate had placed it in his hand for a reason. The old woman's voice grew weaker, but her words carried weight. You are kind, boy. More kind than kings? Her eyelids drooped as she whispered, Kindness will decide the stars. She leaned back against the wall, drifting into exhausted sleep. But Arik sat awake, staring at her, the words echoing in his mind. Kindness will decide the stars. The night deepened, shadows crawling across the walls of the workshop. Outside, unseen by Arik, figures moved quietly through the alleys. Two pairs of glowing eyes searched the streets, their voices low and cold. She cannot hide forever, one hissed. The seal has awakened, and now it belongs to the human, the other replied. They melted back into the darkness, their steps leaving no sound. The hunt had already begun, and inside the workshop, a boy sat beside a sleeping alien woman, his heart heavy. his hand clenched around a coin that pulsed with secrets, unaware that his act of kindness had tied him to an ancient story, far greater than he could imagine. The night was quiet around the colony, but the quiet was not peaceful. Dark clouds moved slowly above the rooftops, and the narrow alleys were filled with long shadows. Arik sat in the workshop, his hands resting on the glowing coin, his eyes heavy with questions he could not answer. The old alien woman slept near the wall, her breathing shallow, her body weak, yet her presence filled the small room with weight. He could not forget her words. Whispers of betrayal, whispers of royalty, whispers of hunters who would never stop. And outside, in the streets, those hunters had already begun their search. Two cloaked figures walked through the market ruins, their steps soft, their eyes glowing faintly under their hoods. They spoke in low voices, voices that seemed to hiss like snakes. "She carries the seal still," one said. "The human boy touched it," the other replied. "That means the bond has started." They moved faster, their hands gripping strange curved weapons that glimmered with deadly light. Back inside the workshop, Arik felt restless. He stood, walking to the door, checking the bolts again. The night wind pressed against the wood. Carrying distant sounds, a dog barked far away. A metal bin clattered, and for a moment he thought he heard footsteps. His chest tightened, his instincts whispering that danger was near. He returned to the old woman, shaking her gently. "Wake up," he whispered. "I think someone is out there." Her eyes opened slowly, glowing faintly even in the dim light. She looked at him with calmness but also sadness. "They have come," she whispered. Her voice weak but sure. Arik froze, his fears confirmed. "Who?" he asked quickly. "The hunters," she said. "They never stop, they never forgive." Her hand reached for the coin, but she pushed it back toward him. "Keep it. They must not touch it." The boy's heart raced. He grabbed a metal wrench from the table. It was not much against cloaked hunters, but it was all he had. His father had taught him how to build, not how to fight, but tonight he had no choice. The woman tried to rise, but her body trembled too much. "You must be strong," she whispered. "They will test you." Outside, the sound of boots approached, slow, steady. The door rattled softly as shadows passed by. Arik held his breath, his hand tight on the wrench. A moment of silence stretched. Then the door shook hard. "Open," a cold voice demanded. "We know she is inside." Arik's blood turned to ice. He glanced at the woman, but she only closed her eyes, whispering something like a prayer. The door cracked as a sharp blade cut through the wood. Arik stumbled back, his heart pounding in his ears. The hunters stepped inside, their cloaks falling away, revealing tall figures with gray skin and eyes like burning coals. Their weapons hummed, glowing with strange energy. One pointed at the woman, the exile, finally caught. The other sneered at Arik. "And the foolish human who thinks kindness can hide her." Arik's hand shook, but he raised the wrench anyway. "She's done nothing wrong," he said, his voice louder than he felt. The hunters laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Nothing wrong?" One spat. "She held power that was never hers to keep. She carries secrets worth empires." Their eyes turned to the coin in Arik's hand. "That seal belongs to us," they hissed. "Give it now, boy, and we may let you live." Arik's heart pounded, but something inside him hardened. He stepped in front of the old woman, blocking their path. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice steady now. The hunters snarled, moving closer, their weapons raised. The air grew thick with tension, the small workshop suddenly feeling like a battlefield. The first hunter lunged, his blade slicing through the air. Arik ducked, swinging his wrench wildly, sparks flying as metal struck glowing steel. The force of the blow knocked him back, pain shooting through his arm, but he did not fall. The old woman raised her hand weakly, whispering strange words for a brief second. The coin in Arik's pocket flared with bright light. The hunters stumbled, shielding their eyes, snarling with rage. Arik seized the chance, slamming his wrench against a lantern. The flames burst, filling the room with smoke and fire. The hunters hissed, blinded, their cloaks catching sparks. "Run," the woman whispered urgently. "Take me away from here." Arik grabbed her arm. Pulling her to her feet, she leaned heavily on him, but her eyes still shone with determination. They stumbled through the back door as the fire spread across the workshop. Behind them, the hunters roared in fury, their shadows twisting against the smoke. "We will find you," one shouted, his voice echoing through the night. Arik and the woman ran into the dark alleys, their breaths sharp, their steps desperate. The colony lights flickered above, casting long shadows across their path. Every corner seemed dangerous, every sound a threat, but they kept moving, their hearts pounding as one thought burned in Arik's mind. He had chosen. He had stood by her side, and now there was no turning back. The night swallowed them as the flames of the workshop lit the sky behind them. And in that fire, the hunter's promise lingered. This was only the beginning of the chase. The night air was cold as Arik guided the old alien woman through the maze of alleys. The flames from his father's workshop burned behind them, painting the sky in orange light. His chest ached from running, his hands trembling as he held on to her fragile arm. The hunter's voices still echoed in his ears, promises of capture, promises of death. He had never felt so small, yet never so determined. They reached the edge of the colony, where tall stone walls met the wild lands beyond. An abandoned storage shed stood crooked against the rocks. Its roof half collapsed. Arik pushed the door open and helped the woman inside. She sat heavily on a broken crate, her breath uneven, her body weak, but her eyes burned brighter now, glowing faintly in the shadows for a long moment. The only sound was their breathing. Arik leaned against the wall, his mind racing. He wanted to believe she was only a helpless old woman, a beggar who needed kindness, but he could not forget the coin pulsing with light, the visions of crowns and armies that had flashed in his mind. Nor could he ignore the way the hunters had spoken to her, with fear and hate, as if she carried something greater than anyone could imagine. Finally, he turned to her, his voice sharp but steady. "Who are you, really?" he asked. The woman lifted her head slowly, her eyes meeting his. Her lips trembled as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I was once called Seraphine," she whispered, the name carrying weight like a forgotten song. "Matriarch of the House of Crowns, keeper of the seal, ruler of 1,000 stars." Arik's breath caught in his throat. It sounded impossible, too grand for the frail figure before him. Yet as she spoke, her weak voice grew stronger, filled with echoes of a forgotten authority. She told him of a dynasty that had ruled for centuries, guiding worlds with wisdom and power. Her house had held the seal, a relic of immense energy, passed down through generations. But greed had poisoned her bloodline. Her own kin had betrayed her, striking her down, casting her into exile. The hunters who chased them now were the loyal blades of her traitorous heirs. Determined to erase her forever, Arik listened, his heart racing, every word carving into his mind. "You were a queen," he whispered, but she shook her head. "More than a queen," she said, "I was an empress. And that coin you hold is not just metal. It is the seal itself. The heart of my throne." Arik touched the coin in his pocket, feeling its warmth pulse through his fingers. He thought of the visions, of the armies kneeling, of the thrones in the stars. His voice cracked. "Why me? Why give it to me?" Seraphine leaned closer, her frail hand grasping his wrist with surprising strength. "Because you stopped," she said simply, her eyes fierce. "You were the only one who saw me, the only one who gave me kindness when all others turned away." Her voice lowered, trembling. "The seal chooses not by blood, but by worth, and it chose you." Arik's chest tightened, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He was only a mechanic's son, a boy who fixed machines and fetched parts. How could he be worthy of an empire's legacy? Yet the coin pulsed warmly, as if agreeing with her, as if whispering that it was true. Seraphine's face darkened, her eyes shadowed by pain. "My enemies will never stop. They will hunt you now as they hunted me." Her voice cracked as she added, "But the seal must not fall into their hands. It would give them power to enslave entire worlds." She looked at him with desperate urgency. "You must protect it even if it costs you everything." Arik swallowed hard, his heart heavy. He wanted to refuse, to shout that he was only a boy, that this was not his burden, but deep inside, he remembered the way she had been ignored, mocked and cast aside. He remembered the cruelty of the market, the laughter of the guards, and the way she had whispered kind with such fragile hope. If he walked away, he would be no better than those who had turned their backs. He nodded slowly, his voice quiet but steady. "I'll protect it." The old woman's lips curved into the faintest smile, her eyes glistening. "You have already begun," she whispered. A sudden noise outside made Arik freeze. Boots crunching on gravel, low voices muttering in the dark. The hunters had followed them. Drawn by the seal's energy, Seraphine's eyes hardened, her weak frame trembling as she forced herself upright. "They come, but tonight you have learned the truth," she said, her voice carrying both warning and pride. Her hand rested on his shoulder. "Do not fear the shadows, boy, for you carry the light of empires. The door shuddered as something struck it. Dust falling from the roof beams, Arik clutched the wrench again. The coin burning in his pocket like fire. The revelation still echoed in his mind. He was no longer only a boy, no longer only a mechanic's son. He was the bearer of the seal, tied to the fate of a fallen empire, and the hunters would stop at nothing to take it. The door shook again, harder this time, a growl rumbling from the other side. Arik glanced at Seraphine, her eyes steady, her voice whispering only one word: stand. And as the door cracked open and the shadows poured in, Arik tightened his grip. The weight of destiny pressed against his chest. But he did not step back for the first time in his life. He stood not only for himself, but for her, for the truth. For the seal, the chase was over. The fight had begun. The door cracked under the weight of the hunter's blows. Splinters flew into the shed as Arik tightened his grip on the wrench. The coin in his pocket pulsed like a living heart, every beat faster than his own. Seraphine stood behind him, leaning on her cane, her eyes glowing faintly. Her voice was steady but weak. They will not stop, boy. They will take the seal unless you choose to fight. Arik's chest rose and fell rapidly, his mind screaming that he was only a mechanic's son. But deep inside, something stronger whispered that he could not abandon her. The hunter's shadows stretched across the doorway as they broke through. Their tall frames filled the room, their glowing eyes locked onto the coin's energy. One hissed, "The seal is awake, hand it over, human, and your death will be quick." Arik swallowed hard, his hands shaking, but he stepped forward instead of back. "You'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. The hunters sneered, their weapons glowing as they advanced. Seraphine's frail voice whispered behind him, "Cleverness is your strength, not power. Use it." The first hunter lunged, blade slicing through the air. Arik dodged clumsily, swinging his wrench, sparks flying as metal clashed against energy. The force knocked him to the ground, pain shooting through his arm. But before the hunter could strike again, Arik grabbed a broken pipe and swung it upward. The blow struck the hunter's leg, enough to make him stumble. The second hunter moved fast, cornering Seraphine. Her cane shook as she tried to raise it, but her body was too weak. Arik's heart pounded. He could not let her fall. His eyes darted across the shed, spotting a row of fuel canisters stacked in the corner. An idea sparked, wild and dangerous, but it was all he had. He grabbed a heavy spanner. Smashing it against the canisters, liquid hissed across the floor, the sharp smell of fuel filling the air. The hunters paused, their eyes narrowing. Arik lit a small spark with a tool from his pocket. Tossing it onto the wet ground, flames roared upward, cutting the hunters off as fire spread between them. The shed filled with smoke, the hunters growled in rage, their glowing blades slicing through the fire. Arik rushed to Seraphine, helping her stand. "We have to run," he gasped. She nodded weakly, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. Together they pushed through a side window, stumbling into the night. The chase began, through dark alleys and narrow streets. Arik dragged Seraphine along, the hunters followed, their steps silent but swift, their glowing eyes burning through the smoke. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. Arik's heart thundered, his breath ragged, but he refused to stop. They reached the colony's edge again, where the walls ended and the wild lands began. The ground beyond was rough, covered with jagged rocks and glowing alien plants. Arik hesitated. He had never gone far into the wild before, but the hunters were behind them. Blades humming, voices hissing. "Run, boy, but you cannot hide forever." Arik tightened his grip on Seraphine's hand. He looked into the darkness ahead, then back at the hunters closing in. This was the choice, the moment that would decide everything. He could run deeper into the wild, risking death but keeping the seal safe, or he could stand and fight, likely die, but prove he was worthy of the trust she had given him. Seraphine's weak voice broke the silence. "Choice defines destiny, not blood, not crowns. Choice." Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the firelight from the burning shed behind them. Arik's chest tightened, his fear burning into something sharper. He turned to the hunters, his voice steady now. "I will not give you the seal, I will protect it. No matter what," the hunters hissed, their eyes narrowing. "You are nothing," one spat. "A boy with scraps and dirt." Arik raised the wrench again, his knuckles white. "Maybe," he said, "but I am the one who chose to help her when no one else did." The hunters lunged forward, and the chase turned into battle once more. Arik swung his wrench, blocking a strike. the coin pulsing with light inside his pocket. Each flash gave him strength, guiding his movements. Seraphine whispered words in her strange language, her voice filling the air like a chant. The ground beneath him trembled slightly, the air vibrating with unseen power. The hunters snarled, realizing too late that the seal was no longer a dead relic. It was alive, awake, feeding on the boy's courage. Auric's eyes burned with determination as he struck again. For the first time, the hunters staggered back, their confident sneers fading into frustration. They regrouped, circling him like predators. Auric stood his ground, sweat dripping down his face, every muscle screaming behind him. Seraphine whispered again, her words clear this time. You chose to stand, and the seal has chosen you. Remember this night, boy. It is the beginning of your story, the hunters snarled. Blades raised and the firelight glinted across their armor, but Auric did not move back. He planted his feet, ready for whatever came. The choice had been made. The path was set. The boy who once was nothing now carried the weight of empires, and the hunters would soon learn that kindness, once ignited, could not be broken. The night stretched endlessly as Auric and Seraphine fled deeper into the wild lands. The hunters' footsteps echoed behind them. But every time Auric thought they were about to be caught, the coin in his pocket pulsed with light, guiding him forward. It was as if the seal itself wanted him to reach somewhere, some hidden destination. Seraphine leaned heavily on him, her cane barely holding her weight, but her eyes glowed with a strange certainty. She whispered between breaths, "The seal remembers. It calls you to the place of crowns." The land outside the colony was strange and harsh. Jagged black rocks rose from the ground like broken teeth, and glowing blue plants lit their path with soft light. Alien insects buzzed in the air, and the wind carried a distant hum. Like voices from another age, Auric had never been this far before. Yet his steps did not falter. Something deep inside him knew he was walking toward destiny. At last they reached the base of a great cliff. Carved into the stone was an ancient door, tall and wide, covered in symbols that matched those on the coin. The hunters' shouts echoed in the distance. Closer now, Auric pressed the coin against the door, and at once the symbols lit up with golden fire. The massive stone parted with a deep rumble, revealing a passage into the heart of the cliff. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with age. The walls glowed faintly with veins of crystal, lighting the path without torches. Seraphine's steps grew steadier as if the place itself gave her strength. Her weak body seemed to straighten. Her frail voice gained weight. She whispered, "This is the Vault of Crowns, the last secret of my people." Auric's eyes widened as they entered a vast chamber. Columns of crystal reached toward the ceiling, and in the center stood a throne of silver and stone. Around it were artifacts, glowing orbs, and weapons unlike anything Auric had ever seen. And carved across the walls were murals showing battles, empires, and the rise of Seraphine's house. The boy stood in awe, his breath caught in his throat. He had never imagined such beauty hidden beneath the world he thought he knew. Seraphine walked forward, her steps slow but purposeful. Her hands trembled as she touched the throne, her eyes filling with tears. "For years I wandered as nothing," she whispered, "and now I return to the heart of my crown." She turned to Auric, her voice stronger. "But it is not mine anymore. The seal has chosen you." Auric shook his head, his chest heavy. "I am only a boy. I fix machines. I cannot be a king. I cannot rule empires." Seraphine's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Power is not in crowns or thrones, it is in choice. And you chose kindness when no one else did." Her hand touched his chest, above his heart. "That is why the seal awakened for you." Before Auric could speak, the hunters stormed into the chamber, their glowing blades slicing through the air. Their eyes widened at the sight of the throne, their voices trembling with greed. "The vault," one hissed. "At last." They turned to Auric. "Give us the seal, boy, and perhaps we will let you live." Auric's fear returned, but it burned away quickly, replaced by resolve. He stepped in front of Seraphine, raising the coin high. The murals on the walls lit up at once, the crystals glowing brighter. The hunters froze as energy surged through the chamber. The seal's light spread across the floor like fire. Rising into the air, symbols swirled around Auric, crowning him in golden flame. The hunters lunged, but their blades struck only air. A wave of light burst from the seal. Knocking them back, their cloaks caught fire, their screams echoing as the chamber itself rejected them. Auric stood firm, his eyes glowing faintly now with the seal's energy. He felt its power, but also its weight. a voice whispering deep in his mind. This is not for conquest. This is for protection. The hunters staggered to their feet, but Seraphine's voice rang out, strong and sharp. You betrayed your own crown. You served false masters. You are nothing. The seal's light surged once more, and the hunters fled, broken and afraid, their voices fading into the darkness outside, leaving only silence behind. Arik lowered the coin, his chest rising and falling heavily. The glow around him faded, leaving only the faint warmth in his hand. Seraphine stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride. You see now, she whispered, you are no ordinary boy. You carry the hope of more than one world. Arik looked at her, his voice quiet. What do I do now? Seraphine smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. Now you guard the seal, you learn its secrets. You decide what it will mean for the future, not for thrones, not for power, but for kindness. The boy nodded slowly, his heart heavy but sure. He did not know how he would face what lay ahead, but he knew he would not run, he would not hide. He had made his choice, and that choice had already changed everything. As dawn's first light crept into the chamber, the murals glowed brighter. The throne of crowns stood tall, waiting but empty, and beside it, a boy and an old alien woman stood together, bound not by blood, but by the power of one small act of kindness. The hunters would return. New dangers would rise, but so would hope, for the forgotten exile had found her seal again, and a human teen had discovered that even the smallest kindness could light the path of empires.